You may have heard that the Ice Age was a time of mammoths, cave drawings, and brave people wearing fur cloaks who hunted with spears. That happy picture isn't true, though. The truth is a lot worse. Tens of thousands of years ago, Earth wasn't just cold. It was the end of the world. The sky was dark because of supervolcanoes. Food-hungry animals watched from the shadows. Chaos in the climate turned habitats on and off like a light switch. The human race disappeared, leaving behind not even a skeleton. The worst thing is that this fire made your mind, body, and DNA. Every panic attack, every night of not being able to sleep, every fear of dark woods and deep water. It began here. Before the beginning of time, this was the Prehistoric Hell Era. Being human was a curse, not a prize. And it all started with a huge blast that almost killed us before we even started. The Toba supervolcano, when the sky turned black. Around 74,000 years ago, the planet changed in a single horrifying week. In what is now Lake Toba, Sumatra, an island in present-day Indonesia, the Earth tore itself apart. A supervolcano erupted with a force estimated at 2,800 cubic kilometers of ejecta, nearly 100 times more powerful than Mount Tambora, the eruption that triggered the year without a summer in 1816. But Toba was no ordinary eruption. It was one of the largest volcanic events in the last 2 million years. Ash from Toba fell as far away as South Africa and India. Ice core data from Greenland and Antarctica shows that global temperatures plunged by as much as 3–5 degrees Celsius and stayed low for over a millennium. For early humans, who were already struggling to survive on the margins of the Ice Age, it was the beginning of what scientists call a volcanic winter. But what does that mean? Imagine this. The sun disappears behind an endless grey haze. Plants stop growing. Animals starve. You haven't seen a blue sky in months. Rivers dry. Your tribe's firewood is wet. Starvation begins. You eat bark, then bugs, then maybe someone who didn't make it through the night. Recent studies of lakebed sediments across Asia and Africa reveal a layer of fine volcanic ash, the Toba layer, distributed across thousands of kilometers. Indian archaeological digs show a clear shift. Thriving human populations suddenly vanish or shrink above the ash line. In South Africa, at Pinnacle Point, archaeologists found evidence of continued human habitation, but just barely. Shellfish middens and fire pits appear more frequently right after the eruption, suggesting that small coastal groups of humans clung to the ocean's bounty while inland ecosystems collapsed. Here's where it gets even darker. In the 1990s, geneticists noticed something strange. Modern humans all seem to descend from an unusually small ancestral population, possibly as few as 3,000 to 10,000 individuals. This isn't just speculation. It's written in our mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome lineages, which show extremely low diversity compared to other species. Toba may have helped make the modern mind what it is today. With not enough food, a lot of danger, and other people dying, the pressure to come up with new ideas went through the roof. It became a question of life or death to work together, share, and solve problems. Some historians say that the Toba winter bred people with traits like empathy, long-term planning, and symbolic thought, which led to the development of art, culture, and even language. In other words, the hellscape made us smarter, but it also made us more anxious. The fear centers of the brain, like the amygdala, may have been hyperstimulated for generations, helping us survive in a world of ever-present danger, but laying the foundation for modern anxiety disorders, PTSD, and depression. A 2023 study from the University of Arizona used advanced ash dating techniques to pinpoint exactly when the Toba supervolcano erupted and how its effects spread across Asia. Meanwhile, a 2022 genetic study published in Nature questions whether the eruption alone caused the sharp drop in the human population. Instead, it suggests that early humans were already struggling due to climate changes and food shortages before Toba erupted. Surprisingly, New archaeological digs in Ethiopia and South Africa show that some Homo sapiens communities managed to survive and adapt right after the disaster, possibly by sheltering in caves and finding new ways to gather food. Cannibals in the caves, Homo sapiens versus Neanderthals. In northern Spain's El Cidrón cave, researchers found something that made them sick to their stomachs and made them question what they thought they knew about our prehistoric relatives. Skeletons of people, clearly cut by knives, were strewn around in a sad scene. These weren't the leftovers of animals that had been killed for food. They were prehistoric people. The crowns of the skulls had been opened to get to the brain, which is full of nutrients. Long bones were broken down the middle, and the marrow was sucked out. They had been eaten. The story was told again at Moulin-Guercy in France. Another set of bones, another cave, and another quiet confession written in broken bones and cuts. People really did eat each other in the Ice Age. But did it happen out of desperation, a ritual, or something much scarier? An old war between human species? During the coldest periods of the Pleistocene, survival was a brutal, zero-sum game. Food was seasonal, shelter scarce, and large predators roamed freely. It's in this environment that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals overlapped across Europe and Western Asia. For years, scientists debated whether their interactions were peaceful, romantic, or violent. Now, with mounting evidence, the picture has grown bloodier. At several mixed species sites, Neanderthal and Homo sapiens tools have been found in the same stratigraphic layers, indicating periods of cohabitation or contact. But some of these sites, like Burankaya in Crimea, also reveal something darker. Trauma marks on bones, deliberate defleshing, and signs of ritual mutilation. It seems coexistence was short-lived and often ended in blood. The act of cannibalism is not inherently bad. People sometimes ate the dead to stay alive during the hard Pleistocene winters, especially when there wasn't enough food. This behavior, called nutritional cannibalism, has been recorded in both current and historical times. But some Ice Age cases point to a completely different idea. A young child's body parts were found in Goyer Cave, Belgium, with clear signs of having been killed. The placement of bones, signs of defleshing, and repeated patterns point to a process going beyond just life. They give the impression of a dark comfort with taking the human body apart. Was this part of a funeral ritual? An attempt to take in the dead spirit, or a scary thought about war between species? As more Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA is sequenced, scientists have uncovered multiple episodes of interbreeding between these archaic humans and Homo sapiens. We didn't just fight, we mated. Yet the offspring were rarely fertile for long. Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA is virtually absent in modern humans, implying that female Neanderthals contributed little to our gene pool. Some anthropologists speculate this means relationships were skewed, possibly even non-consensual. Others believe the hybrids simply weren't fit for survival in a changing world. Either way, these interactions were messy, layered with power, desperation, and complexity. And in the dark corners of Ice Age Europe, they sometimes ended with teeth sinking into human flesh. But it's possible that cannibalism wasn't just about fighting or being hungry. Based on what some experts say, it may have had religious or symbolic meaning. Endo-cannibalism, or eating the meat of the dead as a sign of respect or grief, has been seen among modern hunter-gatherers. Maybe the first people did the same thing. Some people think it was a way to get strength from an enemy that had died. Myth and survival ran this world, where thunder gods might hide in the mountains and ghosts live in trees. There wasn't much difference between the body and the mind. People may not have thought of eating flesh as a sin, but as a way to get power or keep the tribe spiritually whole. Importantly, not all evidence of Neanderthal cannibalism comes from Homo sapiens sites. At Krapina, Croatia, some of the earliest examples of Neanderthals eating their own kind have been uncovered, suggesting that cannibalism may have been more widespread and culturally embedded than previously believed. Whether driven by starvation or ritual, it underscores the dire circumstances of Ice Age existence. Food was unpredictable, hunting was dangerous, And in those moments of hopelessness, flesh, any flesh, became an answer. As modern scientists analyze strontium isotope levels in the bones, they're also discovering that Neanderthals may have ranged widely in search of food and resources. This nomadic lifestyle brought them into increasing contact with Homo sapiens, who had superior long-range weapons and complex social networks. It's possible that Neanderthals, though robust and physically strong, were overwhelmed not by brute force, but by the strategic cunning of smaller, more organized Homo sapiens bands. The violence that followed may have been part genocide, part cultural replacement, part grim necessity. And when the snow fell heavy and the stores ran dry, that violence may have ended in a meal. Plagues from the permafrost, the first pandemics. There were plagues a long time ago, before there were towns, trains, and crowded streets. This isn't the kind that rats or ships spread. This is something older, different, and harder to see. During the Ice Age, something dangerous was hidden deep in the frozen lands. They were stuck in the cold ground, in the bodies of dead animals, and in frozen pools. These were the first health threats that didn't come with claws or teeth, but with sickness. People in the past didn't know much about germs, but they could tell when something was wrong. Some animals made people sick, and drinking from freezing streams made people sick. Whole groups would sometimes just disappear. Scientists now think that the first waves of old diseases may have been to blame. Some of these diseases are still stuck in the ice today. When animals die in the cold, their bodies can stay frozen for thousands of years, and inside those bodies, viruses and bacteria can survive. These aren't just regular germs. Some are unlike anything we've seen today. In Siberia, scientists have already found viruses that are more than 30,000 years old and still active. These are called zombie viruses because they come back to life when thawed. If that's happening now, imagine what early humans faced during sudden warm periods when ice melted quickly. Whole herds of mammoths and woolly rhinos lay buried in the tundra. When the ice cracked and the rivers ran again, their rotting bodies may have released deadly diseases into the air, water, and soil. More and more people think that these quiet killers may have wiped out the first humans, not just because they were hungry or scared of animals. Based on DNA tests, it seems that the population dropped by a lot long before farming started. Archaeologists have found places where people used to live in camps that were always busy, but stopped being used all of a sudden, even though there were animals to hunt and water nearby. What made people run away or disappear? It was fast, dangerous, and hard to see, so some experts think it was sickness. Someone may have touched a dead body while searching. It's possible that they drank from a pond that was full of germs from the melting ice. In close-knit groups that don't have doctors or drugs, one disease could spread very quickly. Even animal waste may have been dangerous. As humans followed herds across the cold plains, they often came into contact with piles of dung, filled with bacteria and parasites. If they used that dung as fuel for fire, which they often did, the smoke could carry sickness into the lungs. Many of the same diseases we fight today, like tuberculosis and influenza, have roots that stretch back thousands of years. Some may have even jumped from Ice Age animals to humans, the same way bird flu or swine flu can spread now. However, these early pandemics were not only caused by germs, they changed how people lived. Imagine being with 20 other people, and all of a sudden, half of them get sick. The people who were still alive could blame the food, the water, or even each other. Fear could split up groups of people. People could leave sick people behind, break away from their group, or stop believing people they don't know. This might explain why people in the past were so picky about who they let into their camps. Fear wasn't just of violence, it was also of something worse, a death that no one could see. Some experts also believe these early plagues may have forced humans to become smarter about survival. The need to avoid certain animals, cook food longer, or use smoke to clean water may have started here. Even simple rules, like not drinking from still ponds or staying away from dead animals, could have saved lives. Over time, those who learned these lessons passed them on, shaping the way humans think about safety and danger even today. Now, as modern scientists dig deeper into ancient bones and soil, they're starting to find clues of these long-lost diseases. In one study, researchers found DNA from ancient bacteria on the teeth of Ice Age humans. The bacteria matched strains known to cause deadly infections. This kind of evidence is still new, but it's growing. We're just beginning to understand how deep this threat ran. As the Earth warms again and old ice melts, scientists warn that ancient diseases could return. Permafrost in Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada is thawing fast. In some places, frozen animals and human remains are already being uncovered, some with preserved tissue, blood, and possibly active microbes. The same forces that once threatened early humans might one day threaten us again. The black mat and the mystery of the Younger Dryas impact. There was a strange event 12,900 years ago. After a long, cold ice age, the Earth had just started to get warmer. The plants were coming back. Wildlife was going north again. Even though human groups were still small and spread out, they were finally beginning to do well. Then, almost overnight, the weather turned back into chaos. The temperature dropped, the ice stopped melting, and the cold air came back. In many parts of the world, people and animals were gone. Whole ecosystems broke down. Scientists didn't know why for a long time. But they began to find signs deep in the ground under a strange dark layer of dirt known as the black mat. And those clues point to something very scary. A huge impact from space, possibly an asteroid or comet, that could have changed the world in an instant. The black mat is real. It's a thin, dark layer of Earth found at over 50 archaeological sites in North America and parts of Europe and the Middle East. It marks the exact moment when something went wrong. Underneath the layer, you find bones from mammoths, mastodons, and other giant Ice Age animals. Above it, almost nothing. These animals disappear, along with human tools and signs of life. It's as if time paused, like a curtain falling on a scene that would never return. Inside the black mat, scientists found melted glass beads, carbon spherules, and tiny diamonds, materials that form only under extreme heat and pressure. These are not things that come from regular wildfires or volcanoes. They match what you'd expect after a comet breaks apart in the atmosphere or slams into the Earth. This idea, called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, has become one of the most debated and fascinating topics in modern archaeology and geology. Some scientists believe that a comet the size of a small city broke up in the sky and exploded over North America. The blast would have set forests on fire, sent shockwaves across the land, and thrown so much dust and ash into the air that sunlight was blocked for years. The sudden cold would have killed crops, plants, and animals. With no food, large animals like mammoths and giant sloths starved and went extinct. Human groups who depended on those animals collapsed too. It wasn't just a local disaster. It may have affected the entire planet. In recent years, even more evidence has surfaced. In Greenland, ice cores taken from deep within ancient glaciers show a sudden spike in platinum around the time of the Younger Dryas. Platinum is rare on Earth's surface, but common in comets. This strange signal appears all across North America too, suggesting a blast that spread metal dust across the sky. At the same time, human cultures like the Clovis people, once thriving across North America, suddenly disappear from the record. Their sharp stone tools vanish. Their campsites are left empty. Some believe these people were either killed by the impact itself or by the terrible winters that followed. The Younger Dryas period didn't just bring cold. It may have also brought flooding on a scale never seen before. As the ice sheets began melting again, huge lakes trapped behind ice dams, like Lake Agassiz, burst free. The result was a series of mega floods that tore through the land, wiping out everything in their path. These floods could have drowned entire regions, buried evidence of past cultures, and forced survivors to flee to higher ground, never to return. Some scientists now believe that many of today's legends of great floods, found in cultures from Mesopotamia to Native American tribes, may come from real memories passed down through generations, memories of the chaos that followed this mysterious event. Even so, not all people agree with the idea of impacts. Some people think that the changes were caused by random but strong changes in the Earth's climate systems, like ocean currents or jet streams. They say that what happened could only have been caused by fire and ice. But more and more physical hints found in the black mat, the soil, and the ice cores make it harder to dismiss the comet idea. If it's true, it means that people have already lived through a major extinction caused by space, and it could happen again. Monsters in the shadows, the giant predators that hunted us. Before people took over the world, we were just another animal. We weren't very big or strong, and we weren't at the top of the food chain. During the Ice Age, we were game. We walked through woods where the trees warned us of danger. As we slept, shadows moved across the open fields that didn't belong to us. Something could be after us everywhere we went. And these were not the animals we deal with now. These were real monsters. They were bigger, faster, and stronger than anything we had ever fought before. It was a risk of death to go outside the cave. Every night, there was the sound of breathing just outside the firelight. This animal was one of the scariest ones we had to deal with. It was taller than any person ever reported when it stood on its hind legs, reaching over 11 feet. Unlike bears today, this one had long legs and could run quickly, taking short steps to cover a lot of ground. It wasn't a scavenger that moved slowly. The person ran fast. It could go after people. For sure, it knew where we were before we even saw it, because its nose was better than a bloodhound's. There's even proof that it may have followed groups of people, watching and waiting for the right time to attack. This was not a bear to the people who lived in small groups with only stone-tipped weapons. It was a nightmare. It wasn't just a short-faced bear either. Cats with long, bent teeth called saber-toothed cats prowled the plains. Their huge mouths could break bones. Their strong bodies were made for sneak attacks. Scientists think they waited in tall grass or on rocky rocks and then jumped from high up to knock their prey off balance. You might think they only killed deer and bison, but guess again. Dog bones have bite marks that look like those made by saber-toothed cats. Sometimes, a deep hole in the head or a line of scratches along the ribs are the only signs that someone was there. Then there were dire wolves. These weren't the fantasy creatures from TV shows. They were real, and they were huge. Bigger than modern wolves, with stronger jaws and thicker bodies, dire wolves likely hunted in large packs. If you saw one, it meant more were nearby. They could surround a camp silently, using darkness and numbers to close in on the weakest. A child who wandered too far from the fire, an injured hunter returning alone. To dire wolves, we were just another meal, meat with a brain. Even hyenas lived in Europe during the Ice Age. These weren't the laughing scavengers from today's savannas. They were giant, bone-crushing hunters. With teeth strong enough to crack mammoth bones, they could take down animals much larger than themselves. And when they couldn't hunt, they followed. They sniffed out death and moved in after the fight. For humans, that meant every kill had to be watched, every meal guarded, or the hyenas would come in the night. Archaeologists have found cave sites where hyena bones are mixed with human tools and broken skulls, evidence that the line between predator and prey was thin and crossed often. We didn't have a safe place, which made things worse. The cats got ready in the woods. Wolves lived in the meadows and hunted there. The bears went after them in the woods. It wasn't safe even in caves. Some of these dangerous animals could get into places we thought were safe. In France, cave lion tracks have been found deep inside caves, next to art made by early humans. It's possible that people and big cats lived together in the same caves at times, switching who was in charge and leaving their own marks on the walls. The bottleneck that nearly wiped out humanity. Something terrible happened a long time ago, so terrible that it almost wiped us out of the world. It was a bottleneck, a time when the number of people on Earth dropped so much that we almost didn't make it. Imagine that there were only a few thousand people left in the world. That's not as many as there are people in a small sports stadium. We were all counting on that small group to take care of our future. Almost every person living today is possibly related to those survivors. But what made it happen? Was it bad luck, sickness, food, war, or all of these at once? It's becoming more and more clear as experts look deeper into our DNA. We almost didn't exist at all. Geneticists have looked closely at the human genome, the complete set of instructions that make up who we are. And what they found was surprising. Our genetic diversity is extremely low compared to many other animals. For example, chimpanzees have far more genetic variation than humans do, even though they live in much smaller areas. That shouldn't be possible unless something happened to drastically reduce our numbers. This is what's known as a genetic bottleneck, and the data points to several periods in the past where the human population dropped to dangerously low levels. One of the most serious may have happened between 930,000 and 800,000 years ago, when some studies suggest the number of breeding humans may have fallen to under 1,300 people. That's not enough to safely carry on a species. It's a miracle we survived. What would life have been like for those survivors? Lonely, dangerous, and filled with fear. With so few people left, entire regions would have felt empty. You might wander for weeks without seeing another group. And if you did find one, you wouldn't know if they were friendly. Every encounter was a risk. Would they share food or take yours? Would they help you or kill you for supplies? The pressure to survive wasn't just about nature anymore. It was about each other. In such a world, survival came down to location and luck. Some people may have found safety near coastlines, where fish and shellfish were still available even when the land dried out. Others may have hidden in mountain caves or near rivers that didn't freeze. A few lucky groups may have been in areas where the eruption didn't hit as hard and where big predators hadn't wiped them out. These small bands became the seeds of the human future. Their children and their children's children would one day fill the earth. But at the time, they had no idea how close they were to being the last. In some ways, we are more likely to get sick because our genes aren't very different. Also, because there weren't enough people left to get rid of them, some bad genes were passed down. On a deeper level, people may have changed how they act after almost going extinct. It might explain why we form close bonds with others, like families and friends, and why we fear being alone. It could explain why we get along so well with others when we're with a group, but set rules so quickly when someone isn't with us. These aren't just habits from that group of people. People used to die if they were left alone, but now these tools help them stay living. The bottleneck also means we've lost something. Entire human lineages, languages, and cultures may have vanished forever during those dark years. There may have been songs never sung again, tools no longer made, ways of seeing the world that disappeared without a trace. All we have left are the survivors, and the quiet signs they left behind in our DNA. The real lost tribes, ghost lineages, and extinct humans. We thought we knew the story of our past for a long time. People developed in Africa, spread around the world, and wiped out all the other extinct species. That's what we learned in school. But now, new finds show a much stranger and more complicated story. One with disappeared human groups we didn't know existed. These were not monsters from stories. They were real people like us, with families, cultures, and hopes and dreams. Some of them lived with our ancestors. Some of them may have helped us stay alive. Some of them are still with us because their DNA is still in our bodies, even though their bones are gone. Scientists call them ghost lineages because they are whole branches of the human family tree that have no clear evidence but have left their mark on our genes. The most surprising find was a finger bone and a tooth in a cave in Siberia called Denisova. Scientists first thought it might have belonged to a Neanderthal. They found something new when they looked at the DNA, though. The Denisovans are the name for this new type of person. It wasn't Neanderthals. It wasn't Homo humans. They were not at all like that. They had never been seen before that moment. Since then, we've found Denisovan DNA in people living today, mostly in Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia, not just in Siberia. That means that our ancestors were with the Denisovans. They had kids together, talked, and shared food. The Denisovans did not show up though. Why or how, no one knows. The only reason we know they were real is because their genes have been found. In 2020, researchers studying DNA from ancient African bones found signs of yet another unknown human species, a ghost population that may have split off from the others hundreds of thousands of years ago. This group left no fossils we can point to, no skulls or tools to study. But their genes still flow through the blood of millions of people today. It's like hearing a voice through the walls of time, someone who was there but left without a trace. And they're not alone. In Asia, Europe, and Africa, more ghost lineages keep turning up. Each one hints at a world that was once full of many types of humans, not just one. So what happened to all of them? Some may have died off from disease or hunger. Others might have been wiped out by climate disasters like droughts or floods. But there's also the possibility that some were pushed out, replaced by stronger or more organized human groups. That doesn't mean there was always war. In fact, the DNA shows clear evidence of mixing. Our ancestors didn't just fight with these other humans. They lived with them, traded with them, and sometimes had children with them. The modern human body is a mix of old stories, some we remember, and some we're just starting to uncover. What's even stranger is how much they may have helped us stay alive. Denisovans gave us some genes that help people live in high places, like the Tibetan Plateau. Some Neanderthal gene mutations may help us stay healthy and avoid getting sick. These people are no longer with us, but some of their strength lives on in us. We didn't just get new ones. In some ways, we became them. Still, their loss makes people sad. We'll never fully understand how these real people lived their lives. Their songs, tools, and stories are all gone, but there are still some traces of them in our genes. This discovery is changing everything we thought we knew about our origins. Human history is not a straight line. It's a tangled web of crossings, mixings, and vanishings. The world of the Ice Age wasn't just Homo sapiens walking proudly toward the future. It was crowded with others, many like us, some very different, all struggling to survive in the same harsh world. And most of them didn't make it. We are the last branch left standing. Not because we were better, but maybe because we were luckier, or maybe because we learned how to borrow strength from everyone we met along the way. Climate chaos, when the Earth switched gears overnight. The world did not slowly warm or cool like a scale during the Ice Age. It quickly turned on and off like a light switch. The land could get wet and full of life one day. The next thing you knew, it was frosty or almost dry. It did not take thousands of years for these big changes to happen. All of these things could happen in a few decades or even less. Early people were scared because they didn't have any warning systems, maps, or backup plans. The Earth itself looked angry because it was changing gears without any kindness. Rivers stopped flowing. It went from grasslands to deserts. Forests were gone. Animal groups either moved or died. People had to search for the little life that was left across frozen tundras, sun-baked fields, and coasts that were breaking apart. They didn't think about climate change as an argument. It was very dangerous. Modern science has shown just how unstable the climate was during this time. Ice cores taken from Greenland reveal shocking patterns. In some places, temperatures jumped by 10 degrees Celsius over a short span of years. That's like going from the chill of Canada to the heat of northern Africa in a single human lifetime. Sea levels rose and fell so quickly that coastlines shifted dozens of miles in just a generation. A lake where people once fished could vanish, replaced by sand dunes. Or a dry valley could suddenly flood, drowning everything. No one was safe. Even highland areas weren't spared. Monsoons that used to bring fresh water might suddenly stop. Rainforests could turn to dry scrub. Places that once fed hundreds of people became barren, and there was no way to know when or if the balance would return. This meant that early people were always on the move. You couldn't stay put for long. You might not be able to farm or hunt on the same land the next season. You had to follow animals when they went on the move, even if it meant going to dangerous or unknown places. And if there was already a group of people there, fighting would start. It wasn't just a fight for pride or land. There were fights to the death over water, food, and staying alive. The land was changed by climate chaos as well. It changed how people behaved. We had no choice but to change quickly or fail. We got smarter about making tools, shelters, and packs because of it. We may have also gone farther than ever before in our search for safety, moving into new places and even whole continents. The most famous of these sudden changes is called the Younger Dryas, which began around 12,900 years ago. Before that point, the Earth had been warming up. Ice sheets were shrinking. Plants and animals were coming back. People were beginning to settle and build. But then, for reasons still debated, everything reversed. Temperatures dropped sharply, ice returned, and the warming stopped dead in its tracks. Some scientists believe a comet impact triggered this. Others say it was changes in ocean currents. Whatever the cause, the effect was brutal. Human settlements collapsed. Large animals vanished, and people were once again thrown into a fight for survival against cold, hunger, and fear. Hazy weather caused strange and dangerous traps to appear. Melting ice would sometimes make green slopes that looked like they would be great places to live. But when people moved in, the weather changed again, and those slopes became dead wasteland. Following the Earth's cycles, people had to move in cycles and never knew what would happen next. For this reason, early people were able to move around a lot. They had to be. A group that didn't move was dying. People who could move, change, and rebuild were the only ones who had a chance. These changes caused a lot of stress, which changed the brain in many ways. We learned to think quickly, fix problems, and take risks. We learned how to make plans ahead of time because things could change today. This is where the part of your brain that gets tense when things change, hunts for danger, and never feels fully calm comes from. It came into the world in fire, ice, dust, and water. It's possible that our biggest fears didn't come from monsters, but from a world that kept moving around us. Desertification of Eden, when grasslands became graveyards. In the past, parts of Africa and Asia were green and full of life. There were rivers, fields, big trees, and lots of animals. Early people thought these places were paradise. They had warm sun to wake up to, food, water, and a place to stay. That paradise didn't last, though. The sky stopped raining out of the blue. The rivers dried up. The trees died. The grass turned yellow, then brown, and finally went away. Before a few generations, the land was rich and full of life. Now it's just a graveyard full of broken ground and wind-blown dust. The people who lived there felt like the world had turned its back on them. One day, they were strolling through lush green fields. One minute, they were in the middle of a desert. Scientists now know that many of the world's deserts weren't always deserts. The Sahara, for example, was once filled with lakes, fish, hippos, and even crocodiles. You could walk through it and see forests and plains stretching for miles. But when the climate shifted, the rain stopped coming. Winds blew dry air across the land. The soil cracked. Plants died. Animals moved on or perished. Humans were left behind to figure out what to do next. Some stayed too long, hoping the rain would return. Others left, walking for weeks or months to find new land, if it even existed. Many died on the way, their bones buried under what used to be green paradise. This desertification didn't just happen once. It happened many times, across many regions. In Central Asia, large parts of once lush plains became dry steppes and deserts. In East Africa, where early humans first evolved, giant lakes disappeared. People who had built their lives around those lakes, fishing, drinking, washing, were suddenly left with nothing. The water pulled back like a tide, and what was left behind was empty land and scattered bones. These weren't just bad seasons. They were permanent changes. Eden didn't flood. Eden dried up and blew away. Many of them happened fast, within a few human lifetimes. That meant people were forced to adapt quickly. They had to hunt different animals, eat different plants, and travel farther to find water. This constant movement made life harder. Children didn't grow up in one place. Families split apart. Groups that were once neighbors became strangers, or enemies, as they competed for the few resources that remained. Some may have turned to violence, raiding others for food or access to wells. Others may have simply vanished into the dust. Being alone was the worst part. People could not reach each other as the land dried up. Rivers that used to join different groups of people are now dry beds. Trails went away. Grasslands that used to let people move long distances turned into sand. People from different parts of the world who had traded, shared ideas, or even married were now on their own. It's also very hard to stay alive when you're by yourself in the desert. What you lose is more than just food. You lose hope, stories, and the knowledge that someone else is still living. More and more proof of these lost Edens is being found by modern experts. There are tools, bones, and even works of art buried under the sands of today. Satellite pictures have shown that in some places, old riverbeds were hidden under the sand. This shows that people used to live and grow there. In some, small fish bones and stones that have been worn down by water tell a quiet story of what was lost. But the trend is always the same. A place that was full of life all of a sudden is empty. There are experts who believe that these waves of drought helped make us who we are today. Maybe people left Africa and went to live in other places because they had to move to find better land. It's possible that the stress of having to stay alive made us more artistic, friendly, and driven. But it also hurt. We are still scared that we will lose everything to things we can't control. This is where the deep fear of drought, hunger, and being left behind comes from. When water killed, ice dams, megafloods, and drowning worlds. Water was both good and bad during the Ice Age. Everyone and everything lived because of it. It changed the land and brought people from far away together. Once it turned against us, it was one of the most dangerous things in the world. Huge lakes grew at the edges of the big ice sheets, trapped by ice walls that looked strong enough to keep seas from coming in. Those walls didn't last forever, though. When they broke, they sent out floods that were so big that they wiped out slopes, damaged woods, and soaked everything in their way. These rivers were not calm. These were disasters that came out of nowhere and caused a lot of chaos. Early people didn't have time to run, there wasn't a safe place to stand, and they couldn't get ready. Over and over, these mega floods were like the end of the world. The story of Lake Agassiz is one of the most powerful ones. This huge lake formed in what is now central North America. It was bigger than all of the Great Lakes put together. Ice dams, which are huge walls of frozen water, stopped the lake from spilling south. When the ice broke up, though, everything changed. The dam broke. Then one of the worst storms in Earth's history happened. Water rushed across the continent at very high speeds, making valleys, leveling land, and changing rivers' shapes forever. A lot of experts think it raised sea levels all over the world, flooding coasts some 20,000 miles away. It might have even started the Younger Dryas, a time of global cold that threw the Earth back into an ice age just as it was beginning to warm up. This didn't just happen once. It took place in more than one place. Old glacial Lake Missoula broke through its ice wall more than 40 times in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Each time, it made a water wave that was as high as a building and moved faster than a jet plane. Big rocks the size of houses were washed away by the floods, leaving behind huge wave marks and deep valleys that can still be seen today. In an instant, whole ecosystems were gone. Anyone or anything in the way of the flood had no chance. For early humans, these floods were more than natural disasters. They were monsters made of water. They destroyed homes, scattered families, and wiped out food supplies. A tribe might settle near a quiet lake, only to be swept away days later when the dam gave out. Stories of these floods may have been passed down for thousands of years, slowly becoming the flood myths we still hear today. Many ancient cultures, from Mesopotamia to the Americas, speak of a great flood that ended the world. These stories might be more than myth. They could be distant memories of real disasters, memories carried forward by the survivors. The speed of these storms made them even worse. Rising sea levels take hundreds of years to happen, but ice dam floods happened in just hours. Imagine hearing birds singing when you wake up and going to the water's edge. There, you'll see a wall of water faster than any tree. There was no way out. People would scream, run and climb, but they would still be taken. They would lose everything they built. Things would change on the land. Rivers would go in different ways. The hills would go away. Even the people who lived would have a hard time figuring out what had happened. It must have felt like the earth was breaking apart to them. The Long March, forced human migrations across a dying planet. During the Ice Age, most people could never afford to stay in one place for long periods of time. There were dry rivers, deserts, sudden storms, and cold winds that swept across once warm fields. The land kept changing, the food was gone, the water went away. People had no choice but to move every time the world changed. These trips were not short. They were long, hard marches through dying land. It meant walking for weeks at a time. Sometimes it meant years. Whole families were born, lived, and died while moving around. These moves were not planned. They were desperate runs away. For many, the road was their only home. The Earth's climate during this time was wild and unpredictable. As ice sheets grew and shrank, sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet. That created land bridges, wide paths of dry land where oceans used to be. These bridges connected continents, making it possible for humans to spread out. But they also became traps. When the sea rose again, those bridges vanished beneath the water, cutting people off forever. A group that crossed into new land might one day find themselves surrounded by rising seas with no way back. They would have to survive with what they had, or die trying. Asia and North America were linked by one of the most famous land links. It is now under the Bering Strait. But back then, it was a big area of land called Beringia. It wasn't easy to cross because it was cold, windy, and often snowy. But for people running away from war or hunger, it was a chance to find something better. They walked step by step with the groups of animals across the ice, which was white and windy. They crossed over and found a new, but still dangerous world. New threats, new land, and new problems to solve. There was no break. Other migrations took place across Africa, Europe, and Southeast Asia. People moved from wet areas to dry ones and back again, always chasing the last patch of green or the final drops of water. Many of these journeys were circular. A tribe might return to the same spot every few years only to find it changed or claimed by someone else. Fights broke out. Some were pushed farther and farther from their original lands. Others disappeared entirely. Even when food was found, the threat of being attacked or forced out remained. The road was never safe. People who walked these old paths didn't leave much behind. A few tools that are broken, a few fire pits. It could be a footprint in dried mud that has been frozen in time. But even though they didn't have much, their story is clear. They kept going. There were deserts, mountains, frozen slopes, and flood areas that they went through. Adults were on their backs and kids were in their arms. As they walked, they buried their dead. By the fire, they told stories to each other to remember who they were. They learned how to stay alive anywhere, no matter the weather. Moving all the time became a part of who we are. It made our bodies strong enough to walk far. It taught us how to think ahead, change, and keep going. However, these moves cost something. There was a lot of mental damage. People left behind homes, holy sites, and the graves of loved ones that they would never see again. As small groups split up and never got back together, they lost their languages, customs, and songs. Some probably never knew why they had to leave. All they knew was that if they stayed, they would die or go hungry. The sky didn't say anything, and the land turned its back on them, following the wind, the stars, and the stories told by those who had gone before. The bone piercers, weapons of other hominins. Some people think that early humans were smarter, had better tools, and worked better together, making them kings of the world. That wasn't always true, though. That was a long time ago before we ruled the world. People of other species, like Neanderthals and Denisovans, walked with us. Sometimes they were enemies, and sometimes they were just traveling companions. They were not weak either. They also made guns, sharp ones, strong ones, weapons that could cut through bone and kill in seconds. We early Homo humans didn't just fear animals with claws and teeth because of this. We were also afraid of people who looked like us, but were bigger, more familiar, and just as dangerous. Archaeologists have uncovered some of the earliest examples of weapons made by Neanderthals. These weren't crude sticks or broken stones. They were carefully shaped wooden spears, hardened by fire, and designed for hunting large animals. Some were thrown, others were likely used up close, for stabbing into flesh and bone. These weapons were found alongside the remains of rhinos, deer, and even mammoths, proof that Neanderthals weren't just surviving. They were hunting giants. That meant their weapons were strong enough to break through thick hides and deep muscle. So imagine what they could do to human flesh. Recent findings suggest Neanderthals may have created stone-tipped weapons, just like Homo sapiens did. In some places, the tools are almost identical. It's now believed that Neanderthals had the ability to shape sharp blades, attach them to shafts using glue made from tree resin, and wrap the joins tightly with animal sinew. That kind of skill takes planning, patience, and knowledge. It also takes practice, and not just on animals. When rival groups met, those weapons weren't just tools, they were warnings. In the same way, Denisovans were used to having weapons. We haven't found many of their tools, but the ones we do have are shocking. One time, a polished greenstone band was found that was made with such great skill that it was once thought to be impossible for its time. They could make guns if they knew how to make that. Some experts think Denisovans were very strong and good at living in harsh settings because their DNA is still found in people who live in rough, high-altitude places like Tibet. They fought hard when they did, but it wasn't just the weapons themselves, it was the minds behind them. These other humans likely had hunting strategies, ambush plans, and the ability to stalk prey quietly through forests or across open plains. If you were part of a small Homo sapiens group and you wandered into Neanderthal territory, the trees could be hiding someone with a spear. A few heavy footsteps, a rush of air, and then silence. You'd be gone before your friends knew what hit you. Some skulls from this time show signs of violent trauma, blunt force blows, punctures from pointed objects, and even deep cuts that suggest combat. These weren't hunting accidents. These were battles. We often think of early humans as united against the wild, but the truth is more complicated. There were likely times of peace, when different human groups traded goods, shared stories, or even formed families. But there were also times of tension, especially when food was scarce or territory was threatened. A watering hole might be the only source of clean water for miles. A cave might be the only shelter for weeks. In those moments, words may have failed, and then the bone piercers came out. It's possible that Homo sapiens got better at long-range weapons over time, like throwing spears and later bows. These made things better for us. But before that change, we were both about the same. And Neanderthals were stronger in some ways. They had bigger muscles and thicker bones, which made them more durable. If they had been up against one person, they might have won. It's likely that's why we tried to escape straight fights whenever we could. It was fast, well planned, and a surprise. But violence left marks on the land, on the bodies, and in the stories that came after. Starvation seasons, the 6-month hunger loop. Today, food is easy to find. Shops are full of veggies, meals are warm on stoves, and snacks are close at hand. But eating has been hard for most of human history. During the Ice Age, it was not only hard to find food in colder areas, but it was almost impossible for half the year. It was possible for winters to last up to 6 months. During that time, animals and plants died and rivers froze. There was no gardening, no storage, and no grocery stores. I had a cold and an upset stomach that wouldn't go away. The first people to live on Earth had to get through a long period of hunger, followed by a few months of plenty. This is now known as the feast or famine cycle. Many didn't make it. In spring and summer, the land came alive. Plants bloomed, animals returned, and humans hunted and gathered with every hour of daylight. They fished in rivers, picked berries, chased deer and elk, and filled their shelters with as much food as they could. But they had no freezers or reliable ways to preserve everything. Meat could be smoked or dried, fat stored in skins, and sometimes buried in the cold ground. But much of it spoiled. That meant every year they faced a deadline: gather enough before the cold returned, or suffer the consequences. And the consequences were brutal. As fall came and animals began to migrate or hibernate, the world shut down. Snow covered the plants. The rivers turned to ice. Herds disappeared. And the people were left with whatever scraps they had saved. In the early weeks of winter, they rationed. Small bites of dried meat, carefully measured roots, maybe a strip of animal hide boiled into soup. But by midwinter, those stores ran low. People grew thin, babies cried and stopped growing, elders faded quickly. Mothers starved just to feed their children. It wasn't just hunger, it was slow, quiet suffering. Every day felt longer, every step required effort, and all they could do was wait. Cave bones from the Ice Age tell the story without words. A lot of people, mostly kids, didn't make it through their second or third winters. Their bones are weak, and their growth was slowed down. There are also signs of diseases that are linked to being hungry. In some places, animal bones aren't found for months at a time. Instead, signs of scavenging are found in their place. Some groups even ate leather clothes, bones that had been burned, and anything else that could be boiled down and turned into soup. Some people went too far and turned to eating when nothing else worked. It wasn't just their bodies that the winter tried. They had to test their souls. And yet, some made it through. Those who survived learned hard lessons. They remembered which plants could last longer when dried. They learned how to store fat, how to hunt in snow, and how to move quickly if animals migrated earlier than expected. They even began planning ahead more carefully, watching the skies, the stars, and the behavior of animals to guess how long the next winter might be. These survival skills were passed from parent to child, generation to generation. Over time, they became part of our instinct, the reason we still stock up before storms, worry about empty shelves, and feel anxious when food is scarce, even in safe places. Some scientists believe this long cycle of hunger shaped not just our behavior, but our biology. Our bodies became experts at holding on to fat, storing energy during feast seasons to survive famine. That's why modern humans still gain weight easily but lose it slowly. It's not weakness, it's a survival trait, carved into our genes by generations who barely made it through the cold. Our brains too may have been shaped by starvation. The ability to remember food sources, recognize patterns, and make long-term plans became essential. Those who could think ahead survived. Those who couldn't, didn't. The toxic earth, heavy metals and poisonous plants. We think of hunters going after deer, gatherers picking berries, and fires crackling next to hot meals when we think of early people. But not everything they chose was safe. They also didn't always hunt clean things. The earth itself was dangerous. Plants had poisons hidden in them, and the ground had metals that could kill you. People didn't have science or warnings during the Ice Age. They learned by making mistakes, and sometimes one wrong bite or drink from the wrong spring could make you sick, hurt, or even kill you. Yes, the land was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. Heavy metals like lead, mercury, and arsenic were often used by people during the Ice Age. Archaeologists have found evidence of this all over Europe and Africa. These chemicals are naturally found in the dirt, especially near caves and volcanic areas, which are common places for people from the past to live. The silt in old cave homes in France and Spain has a lot of lead in it. This is probably because people burned certain types of rock or used paints made from minerals. There was poison in the air when people cooked in these holes or took in the smoke. The damage was not loud because these metals build up in the body over time. Death slowly, numbness, and confusion. They had no idea what was killing them. They only knew something was wrong. In Africa, many early humans relied on wild plants for food, but some of those plants were toxic. One example is cassava, a root that can be rich in calories, but if not prepared properly, can produce cyanide. That's the same poison used in modern-day deadly chemicals. It causes weakness, seizures, and a terrifying death if too much is eaten. Today, we know how to soak and cook cassava to make it safe, but early humans didn't. The first groups to try it may have died. The survivors learned slowly what to boil, what to soak, what to avoid. That knowledge became tradition, passed down not through science, but through fear and stories. It was survival through memory. The risks from other plants were less obvious. Some herbs made people have dreams. Others made people throw up or have diarrhea. Some of them made people sleepy, slow, or weak. Some of the early medicines may have been helpful in small amounts, but it was easy to make mistakes because there was no way to track or measure impacts. A family could be killed by a root picked from the wrong mountain. Scientists have found evidence of these plants in old teeth found in some caves. This shows that people were chewing, testing, and playing with nature's chemistry thousands of years before modern medicine. It wasn't always a happy finish, though. Even the animals they hunted could become toxic. Some Ice Age creatures ate poisonous plants that built up in their meat or fat. When humans ate those animals, especially the organs, they might have gotten sick without understanding why. One of the most dangerous substances was vitamin A. In large doses, it's deadly, and it's found in very high amounts in the livers of animals like polar bears and seals. In Arctic regions, modern hunters know not to eat these livers, but ancient humans didn't know that. Some of the first explorers and hunter-gatherers to eat polar bear liver likely died from liver failure, headaches, and bleeding, all from a meal they thought would keep them alive. Fire, too, brought its own risks. Burning certain woods or animal dung in closed spaces released toxic gases. In poorly ventilated caves, families would breathe smoke filled with chemicals that damaged their lungs and brains. Over time, this kind of slow poisoning could weaken the immune system, harm unborn children, and shorten lifespans. People lived surrounded by fire and smoke, not knowing the harm it was doing. Despite all this, humans kept experimenting. We didn't stop eating strange plants or testing new foods. Instead, we learned slowly, painfully, which ones to fear and which ones to trust. Some of today's most important medicines come from plants that once killed us. Others still hide in forests and mountains, waiting to be understood. But the knowledge we have now of poisons, toxins, and danger was built on the backs of people who didn't have a second chance. Their mistakes became our wisdom. Children of fire, surviving the megadroughts of Africa. Before the Ice Age made the northern world cold, Africa, where people were first born, was going through its own kind of trouble. It wasn't ice or snow, it was hot. For more than 100,000 years, megadroughts hit big parts of the land over and over again. During these times, it stopped raining, rivers dried up, and lakes disappeared. It wasn't just a bad season. Some went on for a very long time. The forests turned into dust, the grasslands got very hot in the sun, and every time it did, the people who lived there were on the edge of being able to stay alive. They were the children of fire and grew up in a place that seemed set on killing them. The evidence of these ancient droughts is still being uncovered. In places like Lake Malawi and Lake Victoria, scientists have drilled deep into the mud to find layers that tell a story of vanishing water. These once huge lakes dried up again and again, shrinking into salty puddles or disappearing entirely. In East Africa, where early Homo sapiens lived, rainfall became rare and unpredictable. The skies stayed clear, not with peace, but with warning. Plants died. Animals migrated away. And humans were left to figure out what to do when the land they knew turned against them. Survival meant moving, and quickly. Groups who had once settled near rivers or lakes had to abandon everything. They followed dry riverbeds, watched for birds that hinted at water, and dug deep into the ground for any sign of moisture. Some headed toward the coast, where the ocean still offered food. Others found shelter in highlands or mountain caves, where cool air and mist gave a chance at life. These places became hidden lifeboats in a sea of heat. Small groups, sometimes just a few dozen people, survived in pockets. Cut off from each other, they lived like ghosts, quiet, cautious, and completely alone. The mega-droughts didn't just kill plants and animals. They reshaped the human mind. Fear became a part of life. Fear of the sky, of silence, of a future with no rain. People had to become problem solvers. They built tools to dig and carry. They learned which plants held water, which roots could be eaten raw, which signs in the stars might mean a coming change. They became expert trackers, able to follow a wounded antelope across miles of dry land. And they became storytellers, passing down the knowledge of how to survive, not through books, but through memory. The droughts also changed how people thought about living together. You can be selfish when you live in a wealthy country, but you need other people in a dying land. Shared became important. It wasn't a choice. They had to work together to stay alive. People who worked together were more likely to eat, keep their young safe, and pass on their genes. We became friendlier, safer, and more linked because of the hard times. That's one reason Homo sapiens may have lived longer than other animal groups. It's not just that we got smarter, more like it, but it wasn't easy. The bones of people from this time tell a story of struggle. Many show signs of stress, thin limbs, broken teeth, and malnutrition. Child burials are common. Life was short and death came quietly, often in sleep. There was no escape from the heat. When the rains returned, people would rebuild, but the next drought always came. It was a cycle of hope and pain, life and loss, repeated over thousands of years. The human who never came back. Disappearances from the fossil record. Earth used to be home to more than one type of person in the past. There were many of them, and each one was on their own road. They made tools, raised families, and fought to stay alive. The Neanderthals and Denisovans are two that we know a lot about. Still others are being found. There are also those who disappeared without a trace. Not a good reason, no last fight. There is no sign of what happened. One day they honed their tools and built fires. The next thing you knew, they were gone. No trace of them left in the fossil record. There are no graves, not bones, nothing but silence. These people left and never came back. Their story is one of the most interesting secrets in history. All across Africa and Eurasia, scientists have found signs of ancient human groups who lived for thousands of years, only to disappear suddenly. In one part of Nigeria, strange stone tools were found that don't match any known culture. In Asia, fragments of jawbones and skulls point to people who weren't quite Homo sapiens, but weren't anything else we've seen either. Even in island caves like those in the Philippines and Indonesia, tiny human species like Homo luzonensis and Homo floresiensis once thrived in isolation, until they too vanished without explanation. These weren't mistakes or side branches. They were real people, real communities, and possibly even close relatives. And yet, they left no ending behind. How did they get away? Some may have died out because of the weather. Food and water were lost when ice sheets grew or storms hit the land. Little groups couldn't do well. Others may have been pushed away, absorbed, or just outweighed by new humans that came along and took their place. It's also possible that they died of sickness. Everyone in a small, isolated group could die from an outbreak before it even got to the next valley. It's possible that they never died. Maybe they mixed with other groups so much that time ate away at their identity, and only the genes of those who came after them are what remain of them. Even so, something about the way they vanished feels creepy. These people left behind tools, signs of food, and maybe even drawings or marks. After that, nothing. Sometimes the land itself doesn't tell you anything. Their ruins may have been killed by erosion, floods, and volcanic eruptions. In some places, the silence might be because we haven't found much yet. They might not be here yet, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. Some experts think that whole human species are still hiding in caves that haven't been explored. or under woods that haven't been cleared. These groups that have disappeared are still there, but they can't be reached until then. Chinese skull pieces of people called Red Deer Cave people are one of the most frightening cases. These bones are from less than 15,000 years ago, and they don't look like those of current people. Some experts think they might be a late surviving group of a species that we don't know much about. But no one knows where they went or where they came from. They are gone after those bones, another group that didn't come back. The mind that betrayed, the evolution of anxiety and night terrors. Even though many people sleep with their doors and curtains closed and their hearts beating, many still wake up in the middle of the night, sweating and gasping for air. There are no shadows for them to see. The sounds they hear go away when the lights come on. People have them and name them worry, panic episodes, or night terrors. But what if these aren't just minds that are broken? There was a time when the dark wasn't empty and every sound could have meant death. What if those sounds are echoes? Fear formed the mind of people long before towns and comfort. And sometimes the thing that kept us alive turned into something that wouldn't let us rest. During the Ice Age, fear wasn't weakness. It was a tool. The ones who jumped at the sound of breaking branches, who stayed awake when others slept, who avoided deep water or strange caves, those were the ones who lived. Caution kept them safe from predators, from cliffs, from other humans with weapons in the dark. Over thousands of years, these traits were passed on. They became part of us. The fear of the dark, the feeling of being watched, the sudden bolt of panic before a storm. All of these are ancient alarms hardwired into our brains by a world that was never safe. Night was the most dangerous time. Fire kept the worst at bay, but it didn't stop everything. The short-faced bear could tear through a shelter. Saber-toothed cats hunted with silence. Even other humans could approach in the dark. There was no light switch to chase them off, no walls to stop them. A single mistake, falling asleep too early, letting the fire die, missing a sound, could be your last. So early humans learned to sleep lightly, to wake at the faintest noise, to panic even when there was no clear reason. This wasn't overthinking, it was survival, and it left a deep mark. That old wiring is still in our bodies. Some brain cells, called amygdalas, are in charge of fear and recognizing threats. It can respond to both real and imaginary dangers in modern people. That's why you might be scared while sleeping in bed or have a fast heartbeat, even though nothing is wrong. It's still on high watch, but the world has changed since it used to keep us safe. Threats are not as strong. The mind is still behind. Constant worry may seem like a flaw, but in the wild, it was useful. The anxious person was the one checking the perimeter, counting the food, watching the weather. They were ready. Calmness was a luxury for those who could afford mistakes. Most couldn't. So the brain became a machine of endless planning, scanning, and second-guessing. Today, this can turn into anxiety disorders, endless spirals of thought, imagined dangers, and fears that never go away. But the engine behind it was built in the firelight of survival. Even sleep itself was different. Scientists now believe that early humans may have slept in shifts. In small groups, someone always stayed awake. This would explain why humans today have different natural sleep patterns. Some rise early, some stay up late. These differences may have evolved to keep the group safe through the night. But it also means our sleep was always broken, always alert, always half ready to run. That edge over time turned into insomnia, restlessness, and dreams filled with dread. There may have been a reason for nightmares too. They made us act out danger, which was bad, to think about what could go wrong, so we'd be ready if it did. If someone dreams that they are sinking, they might stay away from deep water. A dream about an attack might make you more aware the next day. The brain doesn't take a break for fun. It does training. It teaches by making you scared. But in the present day, these things are always going on. We take the stress with us because there is no real danger to let it go. It turns inside out. It turns into a mental illness. But even in that struggle, there's a strange kind of strength. The same brain that panics in the dark is the one that helped us outthink predators, plan migrations, and build civilizations. The fear response may feel broken, but it's ancient and powerful. It helped us climb down from trees, cross frozen valleys, and outlive every rival. It betrayed us with shaking hands, but it also saved us with sharp instincts. We are here because our ancestors were afraid. The day we took control and lost everything. About 12,000 years ago, people made a choice that changed everything. We stopped going after animals and began to keep them. We stopped collecting wild plants and put them in the ground. We made farming possible. At first, having power over nature itself seemed like the greatest win of all. No more lengthy moves. No more going hungry in the winter. We finally moved into one place, built homes, raised animals, and stored food. A heavy price was paid for that choice, though, and it still haunts us today. Because we lost something deep inside ourselves when we took over the earth. We lost our freedom. We got sick. We got out of sync with the world around us. It wasn't the start of heaven when we began farming. It was the start of a new kind of pain. For hundreds of thousands of years before agriculture, humans ate a wide variety of food. They hunted, fished, and gathered from dozens of sources. Their diets changed with the seasons. They were strong, lean, and active. But once farming began, everything narrowed. Most early farmers relied on just a few crops, usually wheat, barley, or rice. These foods were easier to grow and store, but they lacked many nutrients. People began to suffer from malnutrition. Their bones became weaker, their teeth decayed. Skeletons from farming villages show more signs of disease and stunted growth than those from hunter-gatherers. We gained calories, but we lost nutrition. And farming brought another quiet killer, sickness. Being close to animals meant getting new germs. Cows, pigs, and chickens all had bugs and viruses that got into people's bodies. Colds, measles, and the flu all have roots in the early days, when people started keeping animals as pets. Before farming, sickness didn't spread very far when people were together. Now, though, people lived in bigger towns that were close together. The disease quickly spread. There were plagues. People used to move to avoid dying, but now they died where they were. When food became something you could store and control, people began to divide it unevenly. Some had more, others had none. Leaders rose, not just those who could hunt well or protect the group, but those who could control land and grain. Hierarchies formed, classes formed. Women, once central to the survival of mobile groups, were often pushed down in farming cultures, made to work the fields or raise children, while men claimed ownership of land and power. Inequality was born in the furrows of the first ploughed fields. Farming also chained people to one place. The freedom of movement, the ability to leave when the land failed or danger came, was lost. Villages became traps. When droughts came, people starved because they couldn't just follow the herds anymore. When the soil wore out, they stayed anyway. When war came, they had something to defend and something to lose. The peaceful myth of farming hides a darker truth. It made war more common, not less. Land became a prize. Food became a weapon. And for the first time in human history, organized armies rose to take what others had. And yet, we didn't stop. Farming gave us cities, writing, money, temples, and technology. It built everything we call civilization. But underneath it all, the cost remains. Our bodies still struggle with the diet farming gave us. Our minds still carry the stress of packed living. Our society still wrestles with inequality rooted in ownership and control. We traded the wild for the wall. We gave up the open sky for roofs and rules. The story of humanity is not one of comfort, but of endurance. We were not born into peace. We were carved by chaos, shaped by volcanic ash, sharpened by hunger, hunted by monsters, and haunted by cold winds and vanishing skies. Every step forward came at a cost. Every victory left a scar. The people who lived through the prehistoric Hell Era weren't superheroes. They were fragile, frightened, and often broken. But they kept going. They held on to life with shaking hands and whispered stories in the dark so their children would remember. We are here because of them, not just because they survived, but because they refused to surrender. They taught us that suffering can become strength, that fear can become wisdom, and that even in the worst times the human spirit doesn't break. It burns.